Get going this morning. Good morning, everybody. It's a nice rainy day here in Seattle. My name's Nancy McSherry Jensen. I know some of you, not all of you, but welcome to our weekly Hangout Habits. This week, we're going to be getting interview tips on workplace culture from Aparna Rae, who is the principal at Moving Beyond, a diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting practice. We'll talk a little more about Aparna in a second. I want to give you a little insight into Hangout Habits. If this is your first time here, we run these events every week, Thursday mornings at 10 a.m. Pacific, and we are live and online. So what our goal here is to help people move their job search strategy and progress along. So we give you actionable tips so that you can get into the habit of working on your job search while you're engaged in everything else that's going on right now. So we have a live speaker every week, and then we will, at the end, we'll put you into breakout rooms, sometimes with a prompt for things to talk about. The goal is to get you an expanded network. And so we've been doing these for about 4 months. We're growing. We're really excited to see you all here. We want to give you a heads up about our accountability program. If you have not heard about this yet, please consider kicking this off with us. We have a new program where we're going to put people in small groups. We'll have moderated topics with real-time progress and check-in. So we are still taking names for our summer program, and then we'll kick it off. We'll have another one that runs in September. So if you haven't already signed up and you're interested in this weekly accountability, we'll have a live meeting. I think it's every Tuesday, and then we'll have you meet in smaller groups through the week to move you to your next goals. And then we'll have video on demand for post viewing. This is, we're comping it in the summertime. We'll start charging in the fall. So we're really excited about this as well. And then coming up, we've got some, and I want to give you the heads up on a couple of things that are coming. Next week, we have, I didn't put it on here, we have Suzanne Mulder, who's the head of learning and development for global data at Bloomberg, coming in to talk. We also have Adrienne Metoyer-Eng, who's senior director of compensation and benefits at SurveyMonkey, talking about remote work comp. Like it or lump it, I'm going to come in and talk about transitional skills how-to. And then we've got Matt Youngquist from Career Horizons talking about online networking. So we've got some really interesting topics coming up. Check our website for the latest and check the community page. Right now, I want to talk about Aparna. In addition to being the principal consultant at Moving Beyond, she's also the co-founder of Future for Us, which is in a community for women of color. She has really spent her career working with private and nonprofit organizations to create models for replicating processes, programs, tools, and technologies with the goal towards driving impact. She has worked in international development, in social innovation. She's worked with multinationals and startups and government institutions, including, and you probably have heard of these, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Starbucks, Microsoft, and the Central Square Foundation. We are delighted to have her here talking today about interview tips for when you're looking for a job and what to look for when you want to work for a good employer. And so at this stage, I'm going to stop talking and hand things over to Aparna.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. Thanks for having me. I'm going to encourage all of you, and this might feel different than the usual, but I'm going to encourage all of you to come on video, even if you're in pajamas, so that we can see you, so I can see you. And feel free to get off of mute. Like, we're a fairly small group, and so ask questions. Feel free to ask questions through the chat or just come off of mute and ask them as we move along today. So I'm gonna start sharing my screen. Okay, interviewing tips. I heard that many of you are really interested in going to work for an employer that really cares about women, probably people of color, an employer that's going to treat you well. And so I thought, well, how do I arm a group of really smart women to find the right fit? So I'm going to talk about three things today. Let's see. Identifying core values. You've probably already been thinking about that and doing some of that with other speakers and with Nancy and Sarah, but really thinking about what is the most important thing to me. Finding alignment with those core values. And so what are the companies that are going to meet me where I am and where I want to go? And what are some questions that are worth asking? So in terms of core values, and also like my PowerPoint skills are not the best. But in terms of identifying core values, I think, there are a lot of culture pieces that are important. And so you might say, I'm really interested in going to work for an employer that supports working parents. You might say, I'm really looking for a flexible workday. Like, I don't want to be beholden to a schedule. Or I want to work remotely. Some people really like that. Others really struggle with it. But if that's important to you, that's part of your values. The benefits that you're looking for, and so as you start having, and, I'm like assuming all of you have worked before, so that negotiating your benefits becomes a really important part of your career journey, and asking yourself, do I want more money, or do I want more vacation, or do I want both? Is having a high paying job the most important thing to me? And if that is, like, kudos to you. I think that's a great goal. That's a great value to have. And finding an employer that pays above market rate is going to be really important to you. But these are just a couple of things that I thought about. But as you're navigating this, this terrain of like, who should I apply to and how do I get savvy about my employers? I definitely think that you want to ask yourself, what is it going to take for you to be successful? For some folks, that definitely is having a flexible workday, or having an organization that has a strong onboarding program. You also want to ask yourself, what is important to me in my life currently? Like, what do I need an employer to provide for me that's going to help me manage my current priorities and my obligations? That could be caregiving responsibilities. Maybe you're training for an Ironman also, like, that's your priority. And if that's, if that's what you're working towards, you probably need your employer to know that you're going to train 3 hours a day. And so in all of this, my invitation to you is, think of yourself as the asset, and your employer should want to meet you where you are. And I think the first sign of a really great employer is that they're not going to be in judgment of whatever your goals and priorities are, be it like training for the Ironman, or like caregiving for someone who's ill or elderly or children, and is going to actually ask you what you need to be successful. But if they aren't asking you, you should ask them. So aligning your core values, do the research. I think lots of speakers are going to ask you to do the same thing. You need to do your research so you know what you're walking into. And 3 tools that I highly, highly, highly recommend are Just Capital. And I'll send this deck to you. It has all of the links built in, so you can click through. Just Capital is a really great independent resource. It's an index of companies' rankings across many different aspects. But one of the things that they're ranking companies on is how they treat their workers. And so when you go to their website, you're going to be able to search a company, especially the Fortune 500s and the Fortune 1000s. You're going to be able to find lots of information about the extent to which they're taking care of their employees by way of benefits, flexibility, promotion pathways, really strong onboarding practices. and you're going to be able to dive in, and also like the comfort of knowing that all of this is publicly generated. So companies are not providing this information. Employees are providing this information in the index. The other resource is Glassdoor. It is not a resource where you can break responses by race or gender, but it gives you a really great broad snapshot of the organization. And you're going to be able to see, it's almost like Yelp. Like you can go to Yelp and see a 3-star rating on a restaurant and still take the risk of eating there, because it might be like, well, the service is slow. And so like, if you don't care about getting your food quickly, you might be like, oh, the food is good, the service is slow, I don't care, I'm going to eat there. So Glassdoor is the Yelp in all of the ways that Yelp is Yelp. Like, is it super reliable? I don't know, probably not. Like, does it provide some information that's going to be helpful? Yes, it provides some information that's going to be helpful. And it also provides salary bands. So let's say that you're applying for a program manager role at Microsoft. It will show you salary bands for a program manager across lots of different business areas. And so you're going to be able to see, oh, if I'm going to be a PM on a more tech focused team, I might make 6 figures. But if I'm going to go be a PM on the business side, I might only make 80,000 or 60,000. So that salary band is really helpful. And the final resource, which is the one that says make your voice heard, is a new platform called Canaries. And Canaries ranks companies on the basis of gender and racial identities and diversity. So there you can see, is the leadership of an organization diverse, both on the race and ethnicity front and on the gender front, and other variables as well, like disability and sexual orientation. It has reviews from people that have worked at those companies as well, so you can see like, what am I walking into. It does have job listings as well. So if you find a company and you're like, wow, their values really line up with mine, their leadership team is diverse, their board is diverse, I want to apply to work for a job there, then you can also find jobs at those organizations. So these are the 3 resources I use. They're not the end all be all. I'm going to share a couple more. So continuing on the path of doing some research, you want to dig a little bit deeper, because all of these indexes and Glassdoor type platforms are fed by former or current employees. You want to know what the companies are saying about themselves. And one of the things that you can do pretty quickly in a job search is see if they have 2 kinds of reports. Do they self-publish diversity and inclusion reports, which is a little bit of telling on yourself. If you're an employer, you're putting out there what your numbers are. You're making yourself open to criticism. Good employers put their diversity reports on their website in an easy to find place. You should be able to like do a Google search and it should be on the first page. And so check out the ones from Slack. It's an example of a really great report. It's super easy to read. And then on the top right corner, I pulled an example from Vox Media. And so what I love about like Vox's report is that it's online, so you don't have to download an 80-page PDF to read through. Also, you can look at the gender and ethnic makeup by different layers of the organization. And so like on the leadership, they're letting the world know that like 67% of our leadership is white. And it's there for public consumption. You can make a decision of like, do I want to work at a company that has this breakdown? Vox is really cool as well because they show you their trends over the last 10 years. So you can see like incrementally how the makeup of the organization has shifted. The other kind of report that you should be able to pull pretty easily for most larger companies is called an ESG report. It stands for environmental, sustainability and governance. And ESG comes out of labor standards. All of the big companies have to file it legally, and it will have financials, and it'll have like, well, what are their big spending buckets? You don't have to look at the financials, but what you can scroll for is how are they talking about themselves and what are they listing as being key priorities to their business. So it'll be called an impact report or a stakeholder report, or sometimes straight up it'll be called the ESG report. So scan that. That's super helpful. And then I think the last bit of it is, money is important. And talking about it is important. And knowing what you're worth is really, really important. I never recommend walking into a conversation, be it with a recruiter or a hiring manager, without knowing kind of what the range is. And I'll talk next a little bit about the laws that exist in the state of Washington specifically to protect you. But two places where you can get salary information that I think is actually pretty fair is PayScale. So PayScale has a salary survey, and it's a form that you fill out. It's maybe got like 15 or 20 questions. And at the end, it'll say for similar roles, this is the pay range. And it'll give you a snapshot across different sectors as well. Because for instance, being a marketing manager at Microsoft is going to be very different than being a marketing manager at an agency versus at an agriculture company. It's going to come with really different kinds of compensation. So you can see what the range is. The other place that's kind of boring and has no user interface that is worth writing home about is the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The BLS platform is actually the best place to find salary information, especially when you're looking for jobs outside of high-paying sectors. So there's lots of information about what's happening in high-paying sectors in big Fortune 1000 companies. But where do you go? Maybe you want to be a chef, or maybe you want to work in a gardening place. I don't, right? BLS is where you're going to find salary information, and you're going to be able to see what men are getting paid, what women are getting paid. You're going to be able to see the distribution of race and ethnicity in that particular job category. And you're going to be able to see what is market rate and what's the median. So median is not an average. Median is that cluster in the middle, right? So it'll show you what the range is. So if you really want to be a chef, it'll say, yeah, the range is 40,000 to 250,000, and the median is 60,000. So now 60 to 80 is probably your range of play. But you can then go to the employer and say, hey, you're offering me 45,000. I really feel like market rate, to be fair, it's going to be 60. Can you meet me there? So those are two things. And then finally, how do you know to ask the right questions? In the state of Washington, we have a really progressive piece of legislation on pay equity and pay fairness. The federal legislation and the laws that exist have not changed since you were born, which could be a range of 30 to 60 years ago. They haven't changed in a very long time. So the state of Washington, a couple of years, adopted a pay equity law. And so it gave more rights to employees, and it gave more rights, and in fact, it created rights for potential job applicants. Now, we know that companies should not discriminate on the basis of gender. It's a really hard thing to prove out. And this is where your research will help you, and you'll be able to see, well, what are people making? When you're having conversations with recruiters, legally, you can ask them about what are their opportunities for advancement. They should be able to say to you, these are the ways in which we invest in our company. you should also have access. And so know that legally, if you say, hey, I would love to know what the compensation range is or the salary range is for this role, they're legally obligated to provide you with that information. If an employer, potential employer, is being shady or dicey with answering, that should be a big red flag. What that generally means is that they're paying below market rate and they want to have access to the broadest, smartest range of candidates. And they'll have taken you through an interview process. Probably they offer you a job and you're like, what, it only pays 10 cents an hour? No, I don't sign up for this. So ask for salary information in that first conversation. Ask for it. If they're reaching out to you, and they might reach out to you via LinkedIn and sending you a job description, if it doesn't have salary information, write back to them and say, hey, I'm really curious to know what the range is for this role. And when you're having a conversation with them, always ask not just about the range, but they might say, well, the range is 60 to 90. Well, that's like a 50% difference. And so you can ask them, hi, like, what are the qualifications to be on the higher end of that band? I'm really curious if you can help me understand what the difference is between, being on the lower end of the band and the higher end of the band. And they might say, well, on the higher end of the band, we're looking for all of the desired qualifications. And if you just meet the basic set, you're on the lower end. You can also ask them, I'm looking at you and I'm thinking that some of you have been alive a little longer than me. And you might ask them, well, what non-traditional aspects of my life count as tenure in your opinion? Like for instance, I would say moms are the best project managers in the world. And so if you have been like parenting for a very long time and managing some very complex like school and activities schedule, I mean, that's a real skill. And the recruiter should be like, oh yeah, you've been a mom for 10 years. That's amazing. Like you probably know how to manage very complex schedules. And you know how to get your work done because like everything has deadlines. Like you know how to pay fees on time, you know how to get homework done on time, right? The other thing to know, like if you already have a job right now and you're looking for a job, is that you have some really deep protections against retaliation. And in this current COVID moment, like I think the state is inundated and it's hard to push things through, but asking any of these questions about salary, promotions, none of this should result in negative actions by your current or future employer. So the other thing is like knowing your risk tolerance. Like where are you on the scale of like timid to shameless? I think you can tell I'm definitely like much farther on the shameless end of things. So I will ask a lot of questions because I know that if my asking questions makes an employer not want to have me, then I don't want to work there. If you're not getting to spend the time with me, I'm probably not that interested in working there. That's not to say that you have to join me on this end of the spectrum, but know where you are. Know what your risk tolerance is, and there are many factors that inform your risk tolerance. So really self-check.
Hey, Aparna, this is Nancy. In terms of, I think that this is a really important element that relates to the research. I think the more research you can do ahead of time, the lower you can make, the lower risk this conversation is. Many lawyers will say, don't ask a question that you already know the answer to. And sometimes, and I'm wondering if you can address this a little bit, if you already know from your research, if you already know that, for example, the diversity quota in a particular company is pretty low, but you want to address that. So you already know it's only 5%.
Yeah.
I was thinking like a great way to say that is, could you tell me more about your diversity? I mean, how forthcoming do you want to be about your public information? I think you
Mhm.
should be very forthcoming, but I'd like to know your perspective.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, you know, if you're researching an employer and they have an all-white leadership team, I think it's fair to have a conversation and say, hey, I've noticed that like this is the status of your team currently, and like the people that you're serving or selling into are really diverse. I'm curious what you have planned to have like your leadership team or your um, manager layer reflect your clients or reflect your beneficiary. Um, they should be able to answer that. I mean, there are no legal protections for asking that kind of a question, unfortunately, but you could definitely say, hey, like this is something that I noticed, which will signal to them that like you did your research. And then you can say, what are you doing about it? You know, and I think this moment is a particularly good moment to be asking those kinds of questions because everything that was a faux pas 3 months ago is no longer a faux pas. So you could be fairly direct and oftentimes, you know, when I work with clients, I'll say to them, listen, this is not a judgment. I'm just really curious about how you're planning to shift the status quo, right? I'm not judging you. Like you have an all white leadership team, like it is what it is, but what are you doing about it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really pertinent. I know, in fact, I know a couple of people on this call that, you know, having a mission aligned organization is essential to where they're going in the future. And so they, you know, for many people, especially when you're looking for a job, you
Yeah.
feel very vulnerable to begin with. And so that's a great way to say, listen, I'm not judging you, but I do want to know. Like, this is
Yeah.
important to me as a prospective hire.
Yeah. Yeah, let them know what your core values are. I mean, I
Yeah.
think that looking for a job is a lot like dating. You know, like the more honest that you can be upfront, the better the outcome is going to be. And sometimes you've been dating for a year and you're like, oh, it's not a great fit. And then you can move on, right? There are things that you're not going to see right away. But I would say that the more you can resource yourself, the better off you're going to be. And you know, like I really love like spending time on the BLS platform. It's like so old and like ugly, but it has so much information.
It's
And
really rich. Yeah, anybody who out in here who's a numbers junkie, you can just rat hole down the BLS for hours.
yeah. And the Just Capital platform, the thing that I like about it the most, quite frankly, is that you can see how they're categorizing what good looks like. And so when you walk into a conversation, you can just take all of those metrics and make it into a question. So you can say, hi, I'm really curious to know how you support employees with work-life balance. I'm really curious to know how you do career tracking or professional development. You know, what do the budgets look like? Like you can just make every metric that they have on that page a question. And that, you know, will set you up for success. It will let the hiring manager and the recruiter know that like you're damn smart and like you're very serious about this job.
Yeah. One other thing, and I know other people may have questions, but because I'm very interested in this topic, I think you mentioned that in the last 3 months, everything has turned around and that companies are at least more aware that candidates are interested in this. In your work on your corporate side, I know that you
Yeah.
do a lot of work with companies. What are the things that they're talking about right now? Are there things that are, you know, people who are interviewing should know about that are hot topics for them as they come in, particularly on this mission front and diversity and equity and inclusion front?
Yeah, great question. What are they talking about? Well, I don't really care what they're talking about. I care like what they're like
What they're
doing.
doing?
What are they doing?
Yeah.
They can talk all day long. So I'm noticing a couple of different things. And like, here's the truth. And like, you should know this bit of truth. Like, it is a business imperative for companies to diversify their pipelines. You know, so if you're an older job seeker, they friggin' need you. They need you. Like if you're a woman or if you're a person of color, they actually need you. Most organizations have committed to significantly diversifying their pipelines by 2025. It's come out of the Business Roundtable. You can go to the Business Roundtable site and look up their most recent set of commitments. Investing in employees and diversifying their pipelines are the first, I believe is they're the first two things, well above like growing their market share or well above like revenue growth. And so just know that like it is a priority for them to hire you. That priority at the C-suite level doesn't always mirror the savviness, quite frankly, of recruiters that tend to be young white women, often very middle class. So they're bringing all of those values along with them. And like, they're probably like, oh, she's a mom, great. Like, she won't really have time. So part of doing the research and part of knowing what's like what companies are doing is important to break the impasse with the recruiter or the hiring manager, who probably isn't as savvy and probably doesn't even know that like their company made a commitment at the Business Roundtable last year. So you could even say, hey, I noticed that like your company is a signatory on the Business Roundtable, and I really love the 5 commitments. Can you help me understand how like you're living into these first two? Um, so that plus a Google search, just type in company name, diversity, inclusion, and like you will find like all the things that are happening there. The lawsuits, the walkouts, the whatevers. And if you haven't set up a Google alert on like the company that like you're really chasing, set up a Google alert. It's super easy. Like just type in Google alert into Google and then it will walk you in how to do it. Keywords, company name, scandal. I mean, like I have like a scandal Google alert set on all my clients. So like when someone resigns or someone gets fired, I find out about it. Yeah.
Yeah, those are the ones when you want to be fully endorphinated when you read them so you don't freak out, right? Is endorphinated a word? I'm not sure.
Anything can be a word right now.
Yes, yep,
You make your
yep.
own vocabulary.
And frequently we do. Just from folks on the line, and Aparna, I don't want to jump in. If that's the end of your formal remarks, does somebody have questions that you want to ask Aparna before we go to breakout rooms? I know there's a couple of folks on here who have been very dedicated to pursuing impact opportunities. So, okay, well, Sarah, if that, Aparna, if I think that that's been, I learned personally, I learned so much on this call.